deal with what you've got, right? All right, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Today is Sunday. It's September 8th, a red letter day. A red letter day. Actually, not a lot. That doesn't happen today. That's of interest to me. That doesn't mean I won't spend 35 minutes talking about it, but it was on this day in 1504 that Michelangelo's David was premiered. First time it appeared in public. Has anybody seen? How many of you have seen Michelangelo? Yeah, it's much bigger than you think. It's like, twice as high as a person. But that was on this date in 1504. In fact, Michelangelo was working on the Sistine Chapel during this time period, and it was, and we all, how many have seen the Sistine Chapel? Okay, so in order to pay for that, the Pope was paying for that, and in order to pay for that, that was one of the reasons why they were selling indulgences, which led to the Protestant Reformation. In 1565, the first permanent European settlement in the colonies or in North America was founded. Anybody know what that is?
Roanoke?
No.
Jamestown?
No. St. Augustine, Florida.
Oh.
St. Augustine, Florida is the oldest. Spanish. It was founded by the Spanish. So, but that was on this date, and it's still there. St. Augustine, Florida. It's on the east coast of Florida, sort of halfway up, as I recall. In 1636, Massachusetts Puritans founded the first college in the colonies, designed to train ministers. It was named after one of their huge benefactors, John Harvard. Guess what college that's? Harvard University. Yes, that's
I wonder
it.
if are they still true to their
You wonder?
Well,
I'm just kidding.
you know what? There is a seminary there, so they do still train ministers. It was on this date in 1860 that the Lady Elgin sunk in Lake Michigan. Anybody heard of the Lady Elgin? It sunk in 1860, coming off of a town called Port Clinton, Illinois, which is now between Highland Park and Highwood, Illinois. It kind of went away, but it's north of Chicago. 300 people died. It is the largest loss of life on the Great Lakes to this day. And the actual the wreck of the Lady Elgin was found in 1989, and it's now like a protected area. That there's a society that kind of controls it. If you want to go see it, you have to get an application there. But that was on this date in 1860. In 1965, auditions were held, and 437 applicants applied for 4 roles for a TV show where they were going to create a musical group. You know the name of that show?
Monkeys?
Hey, yes, the Monkeys. They were casting 3 roles because 1 role had already been filled. So who was the first one? Davy Jones was the first one. It was already decided that he was going to be a part of it, and then the other 3 came along. Speaking of TV, it was on this date in 1966 that Star Trek premiered. Star Trek, that is the original series. Those of you who, the TOS, who keep track, because there are like 75 Star Trek series now, so you have to keep this. And on this date, it's like, where were you on this date in 1974? 2 things happened in 1974 on this date. Evel Knievel attempted to jump the Snake River Canyon.
Yeah.
And speaking of questionable ideas, it was on this date that Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon. So I don't know whose career went south quicker, Evel Knievel or Gerald Ford, but that both happened on this date in 1974. And finally, today is Richard the Lionhearted's birthday. First, well, maybe later we're gonna have cake and then we'll talk about it, kind of thing. But he's the one that you may not think you know anything about Richard the Lionhearted, but you do if you know anything about Robin Hood, because he's the one that went off on he went off on a crusade and then was captured, and then while he was gone, King John or his brother John took over and was bad, and so Robin Hood had to come and save everybody, sort of. It made for a few good movies or something like that. So that all took place on this day in 1970, or not, his birthday was in 1157, but all that stuff took place on this date in history. So, all right, so we have a big day. All right, well, when we last left our heroes, as you may recall, we had finished up the Ark narrative, chapters 4 through 6, the story of the Ark, where the Ark was, where the Israelites thought that if they brought the Ark to their battle site, that the Lord would follow, and it did not work out that way, and as a result, the Ark, the Israelites lost. They abandoned the field, so to speak, and then the Ark was captured. It spent 7 months in the realm of the Philistines, the kingdom of the Philistines, going from city to city to city. And you'll see that the area of the Philistines is over here. It's down this area, what we would now call the Gaza Strip. That area, it's not exact, but it's that general area. The lower southwest side is where Philistia was. And you can see some of the cities: Gaza, Ashkelon, Gath, Ashdod, Ekron. Those are the 5 cities of the Philistines that we talked about before. And then at the end of the chapter, you remember the book, or the Ark came back, and it came back to Kiriath Jearim, which you see is there just to the west of Jerusalem, and that's where the Ark stayed for quite some time, 20 years. Okay. So the first question we have, and we finished up here in chapter 7, verse 2 last week, or 2 weeks ago, said the Ark remained at Kiriath Jearim a long time, 20 years in all, period. Then the next word is, then all the people of Israel turned back to the Lord. Now the question is, when did the children of Israel turn back to the Lord? And I mean that because, you could say, well, 20 years later. Or they turn back immediately. See, here's the problem. Now, we know we've had a couple of other fun facts that the writer puts into the text. Remember, he said that the Ark came back and sat on a rock. And the writer of Samuel says, and you can still see that rock to this day, kind of thing. And so, if you look at it and say that if you look at it and read it and say, well, it means that after 20 years, then the people turn to the Lord, then there's no indication of anything going on that drove the people back to the Lord. Whereas if you say, and I don't know, it's not clear. The text isn't clear here, so you can go either way. I kind of like the idea that it's fairly soon after the events of the Ark narrative returning. Because to me that makes more sense, where the people realize, okay, we just lost this horrific battle. They lost 30,000 people. We abandoned the stage, but the Lord, we hear it because, they hear things, right? I mean, they hear about what's going on in these other campsites or other countries and things. Word gets across that what happened, and they saw what happened when the Ark came back to Kiriath Jearim. Beth Shemesh, I think, is where it came to first, and the person, either 70 or 50,000 people, depending on which manuscript you look at, died. And that, to me, kind of says, okay, that's sort of an impetus to the people of Israel to say, we gotta clean up our act. We gotta get right here. Or you could say it's 20 years. I like the immediate, or you could say 20 years. Either one is different people. There are journal articles about whether it's immediately or afterwards, okay? So, that's why I say our first line there, our story, 1 Samuel 7, takes place 20 years later or immediately thereabouts. Okay, so again, it's not clear when, but it is clear what happens or what takes place here. All right, so it says, then all the people of Israel turned back to the Lord. Okay, and I think that we're looking here at a repentance level similar to what we see in Jonah, where okay, are these guys completely right. Are they walking in the Lord? Well, yeah, better than they were before. There's no question about it. They're willing to do a few things, but if you follow the story going through, it's like, the Israelites were a fairly fickle bunch. And we're going to see that a little bit more today, even with the choosing of a king. And so Samuel is there, and Samuel again is the first national leader since Moses. He's the priest. He's the judge. He's got a circle of places, and he's built an altar in Ramah, his hometown. Okay, so this is and all indications are that Shiloh, which had been the religious center of Jerusalem, of Israelite culture up until that time, all indications are that Shiloh has been destroyed, simply because it's never mentioned again. And it's certainly not talked about as in the context of it being the religious center, where the tabernacle was. Okay, so we know where the ark is. The ark is at Kiriath Jearim, because that's, to me, I'm going with the ark stayed up there. But Samuel says to them, so Samuel, the people come, it says, I get a kick out of this. Then all the people of Israel turned back to the Lord. So Samuel said to all the Israelites, if you are returning to the Lord. Okay, so Samuel's not buying it. Samuel's like, okay, guys. It's like, if you're and let me go back a minute. It said Israel turns back to the Lord, and other ways that that's translated is that Israel laments after the Lord or longs for the Lord. Other translations translate that turns back differently. Maybe they're remembering the good old days, how good it used to be before the Philistines started, when Joshua was, stories from when Joshua was in charge, or from when Moses was in charge, whatever. And so, again, Samuel's not buying that a wholesale revival is going on here. So he says, all right, okay, if this is what you want, here's what you need to do, okay? And he tells them to do three things. He says, get rid of then rid yourselves of the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths, and commit yourselves to the Lord and serve him only. Okay, so actually there's four things there. It says get rid of the foreign gods. Okay, so again, this is it's that tendency on the part of the Israelites to turn away toward whoever the gods of their neighbors are, or the gods of the Egyptians, or whatever seems to work for them for the moment. There seems a marked tendency, and you'll see that, especially if you go through Kings, that the Israelites do this quite a bit. He specifically notes to get rid of the Ashtoreths. So often people think, okay, when they talk about foreign gods, they're usually like Baal, or maybe Dagon. Remember Dagon? He's the one with the ark. Ashtoreth is actually a female god. So it gets this specific god. And so here, you've got some very specific idol worship going on in Israel at the time. And I think, that might have been the most common one. But, Samuel says, all right, get rid of your foreign gods, get rid of your Ashtoreths. It could be that ones that involves a high place, whatever. There's some distinction, but it all comes down to, get rid of these foreign gods. Again, what's the first rule? Thou shalt have no other, first commandment, thou shalt have no other God before me. Okay? Or one of the commandments. Okay? To get rid of all of them. Okay? And then he says, commit yourselves to the Lord and serve him only. Okay, so it's not God and. Okay, it's not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays are God days, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Or I'm going to serve God in all of these areas and not those. It's like, I'm going to have a kind of thing. It's like I remember once reading a book where it defined an idol. What is an idol? We talk about what are idols in your life. What are the idols in your life? And this particular book gave it down. An idol is anything you turn to when you should be turning to God, kind of thing. So it's like we think when we think of idols, we think, well, listen, there's no statues in my house that I bow down to, or there's no this or that. But there are a lot of things that when we should be turning to God, we turn to. So there, good things can become an idol. I mean, because this author was making, so, the study of theology can be an idol. It can be like, oh, well, instead of dealing with the issues in my life, I'm gonna read a commentary on Revelation. And that's good because it's the Bible and it's all that. It's like, well, you should be turning to God, kind of, sort of thing. But he says, commit yourselves to the Lord. Do all of this, and he will deliver you from the Philistines. He will deliver you out of the hands of the Philistines. Okay, so again, remember, they just had this tremendous defeat by the Philistines. The Philistines are all over the place. I mean, they're centered in that southwest corner, but he says, you do all of these things, and he will deliver you from. So again, I mean, I'm not trying to spiritualize the text, but it's like, it is one of the questions you can ask yourself. If you're in some season of life or place in your life where things just aren't, you just sense the attacks of the devil, or you're not having victory in your life, you can ask yourself, okay, have I gotten rid of the idols in my life? Have I committed myself to the Lord? Am I serving him only? Kind of thing. Okay, that doesn't mean you won't have attacks and things, but it's a good checklist to kind of think, okay, is everything, is everything okay there? So, and he will deliver you out of the hands of the Philistines. So, the Israelites put away their Baals. Okay, so again, corresponding with the foreign gods. Their Baals and Ashtaroths, and served the Lord only. Then Samuel said, assemble all Israel at Mizpah. Now, if you look at Mizpah, it's just north of Ramah on your map. Oh, here. Marty, you don't know where you are.
No.
You're looking lost. Let me give you a map here. It's a handout as well for you. Assemble all Israel at Mizpah, and I will intercede with the Lord for you. Okay. Now, this happens a couple of times. I don't know if there's like a big enough amphitheater or a plain or whatever there at Mizpah, but this happens a couple of times more through Samuel, where you'll see the nation gathering at Mizpah. It is fairly central to the country, but he said, gather all the people at Mizpah, and there they will confess. Or I'm sorry, he will intercede, and I will intercede with the Lord for you. And again, this is something that Moses had done. So again, Samuel is not channeling, but I mean he's clearly occupying the same role relative to Israel that Moses had done. Okay. Samuel said, assemble there. When they had assembled at Mizpah, they drew water and poured it out before the Lord. Okay, or this. Some people look at this and call this a drink offering. Now it's kind of interesting, like what is this all about? It's going to come back. This idea is going to come back later when we get to the end of 2 Samuel. This idea of pouring water out on the ground. So it's not clear as far as what exactly is going on here, except to say that Israel is essentially in an arid climate. Okay, and there's deserts all around. I mean, there are some nice areas there, but it is essentially a desert. It's the Middle East kind of thing, and so in an area like that, water is very important. Okay, it's the life. It's the difference between life and death. And here it's perhaps showing the Lord that our life guaranteed is not as important as our relationship with you. Okay, it's something, again, it's one of those things that it's hard, it's part of the problem with the Old Testament is that we don't have that sort of immediacy. To us, pouring water on the ground is just making a mess. We don't see that as something being very sacrificial. But if you were in the desert and, carrying a water bottle or then it would be, a whole different thing. Of course, we all drank water. In Homer Glen where I live, a couple of the subdivisions had a boil order the other day. And, there's all kinds of gripes going back and forth on the Facebook groups. But, I don't know, those are great for, just to see the people griping back and forth. But we're just, oh man, I have to boil my water. It's an inconvenience for us, kind of thing. And so we don't see it as that. I mean, there's other ways to look at it, but it's clearly, to me, it's just simply, this is a way of showing our dedication to this, that we're going to follow the Lord, that we're giving up our life, we're giving up the guarantee of our life for you. So they give up this pour water before the Lord. On that day they fasted, which is not often mentioned in the Old Testament, not as much as the New Testament. But here they fasted and they confessed, we have sinned against the Lord. Okay, make sure here. Samuel, where am I here? Let's see. Samuel says, rid yourself of the foreign gods and to commit yourselves to the Lord, which the Israelites do. Samuel agreed to intercede on behalf of Israel. The Israelites gather and offer a drink offering. The Israelites confessed, we have sinned. It's interesting. That's a phrase or a construction that's used quite a bit in Samuel. We have sinned. I have sinned. This is the first time we see it, but it's going to come back. Okay, I have sinned, sort of thing, and we'll see how. I think there'll be an interesting kind of look at that phrase as it develops through Samuel. But the Israelites confessed, we have sinned. And they sinned with their idolatry and with their following other gods, is what they're confessing, and their refusal to put God first. That we have sinned against the Lord. Now, Samuel was serving as leader of Israel. Okay, and again, the word leader there could be translated judge, but it goes beyond, he simply goes beyond being the judge because he's also, in essence, what we would call the high priest. I don't think that's an official title that's given to him, but he's given offerings and things like that. And I don't, again, at this point, I don't think the tabernacle exists. Now, it could be, it could just rebuild it. It's a tent, right? It's just rebuild it. And the instructions are all in the Pentateuch. But so he's serving in all of those roles. It's interesting. Let me see. In Numbers 21:7, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Remember my Old Testament. Just again to talk about this relationship. The people came to Moses and said, this is after the snake, where Moses puts the snake up and they all look at it. And in Numbers 21:7, the people, well, after that, then the Lord sent, verse 6, the Lord sent venomous snakes among them. They bit the people and many Israelites died. The people came to Moses and said, we sinned when we spoke against the Lord and against you. Pray that the Lord will take away the snakes from us. So Moses prayed for the people. And so there's an example. This is Moses interceding for the people. And now Samuel is interceding for the people. Okay, so again, the point is to just get an idea of just how important Samuel is. Okay, and how significant he is, how powerful he is. I talked about that one of the ways to look at Samuel is to look at it as a development of power. That Samuel is a very powerful within the Israelite community, the Israelite nation at this point. He's as powerful in Israel as Moses was. Okay, and we know from the end of chapter 3 that even though there weren't a lot of prophets, the Lord was speaking to Samuel. Okay, now Samuel was. So this is going on in Mizpah in verse 7. When the Philistines heard that Israel had assembled at Mizpah, the rulers of the Philistines came up to attack them. Okay, so again, it's when you're a dominant country or a dominating force, it's never a good idea, or it's never a good thing when huge quantities of the mass numbers of the people that that you are supposedly have conquered are massing in large groups. And you see that today. I saw a picture today of this huge crowd protesting something. And again, see, look, that's proof. And so the Philistines hear this, because again, the borders are very fluid. Things get back and forth very easily here. So the Philistines, hey, wait a minute, there's a bunch of people going to Mizpah. And for all I know, they're out there sitting there looking at the road, and they see all these Israelites heading toward, hey, where are you guys going? Where are you guys going? That could be what's going on here. But they came up to attack them. When the Israelites heard of it, they were afraid because of the Philistines. Well, what had happened the last time they went up against the Philistines? Well, they lost 30,000 people and everybody bailed out. Okay? What had happened the time before that? Well, they had lost 4,000 people. And, you know, so it's like, they don't have a good track record when it comes to battling against the Philistines. So the people are like, whoa, wait a minute, oh, we're a little, it's like immediately after, and you know, take whatever lesson you want here, immediately after saying, Lord, we're going to commit to you, we're going to serve you, we're going to do this, the Lord immediately sends the Philistines. Right? It isn't like, okay, listen, God doesn't come down and tell Samuel, tell the people that I'm going to give them about a year or two to work and get used to committing to me only, to trusting in me only. They're going to have time to have some small groups, do some Bible studies, get together, practice, have discussions. Then we're going to have a couple of small things happen, then a little bit bigger, and we're going to grow gradually until you're big, strong believers. No, it's like right away. I mean, they're there. And all of a sudden they hear, hey, wait a minute. Look over there. There's that same Philistine army that just beat us. Okay, they just killed 30,000 of us. Okay, right away it comes. When the Israelites heard it, they said to Samuel, do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may rescue us from the hand of the Philistines. So this is actually, again, going back to Numbers 21:7. That when the Lord had sent, in Numbers 21, the Lord had sent snakes, and they're biting the Israelites. And while the snakes are biting the Israelites, they're saying, Moses, please pray for us. And here, the Philistine army is right there. And there's like, Samuel, listen, whatever you're doing, don't stop. Okay, because they're right over there. You know, and it's interesting that they realize that what's going to keep them, the Philistines, from defeating them is not necessarily the presence of the ark, which was their great idea the last time. Okay, so that they've gone beyond, they've realized, no, it isn't some physical manifestation that's going to bring us victory here. Okay, we need to go beyond that. They said to Samuel, then Samuel took a suckling lamb and sacrificed it as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. He cried out to the Lord on the Israelites' behalf, and the Lord answered him. Okay, so again, we know God pays attention to what Samuel says and asks and does. Okay, and so this time the Israelites had gone to the right source. At first they thought they could manipulate the ark. Now they're going, listen, Samuel, you need to intercede for us. While Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to engage in Israel in battle. Okay, so now get the picture here. They're at Mizpah. Samuel is in the process. Now, I personally have never seen an animal sacrifice, and it's not something I really want to see. But, you know, Samuel is in the process of this sacrifice, and the army is approaching. Okay, so you can imagine here's the sacrifice that's going on, and here the Israelites are looking. You know, whatever they're doing, they're like, look, there's the army, Samuel, there's the army, there's, you know, and you know, I again, one of those things I've always hoped, you know, in my, you know, is that in heaven that there'll be VCRs or DVRs or something, you know, that there's a drone keeping a film of this, because I want to see how much of a hurry Samuel is in. You know, it's like, you know, when they talk about you know, emergency response teams and that kind of stuff, that when an emergency response team comes on an emergency, car accident, whatever, or something, they don't run. They're not supposed to run. Okay, even though, like, if there's somebody over there, they're not supposed to run. Okay, you walk to the scene, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Because if you run, then that gets your heart rate up and your kind of thing, and then you're less able to deal with the person, and you have to look around and see them. So kind of walk. And I kind of imagine that Samuel is just taking care to make sure, positioning the thing just right, you know, kind of wiping the knife off, making sure it's, you know, while the people are going to big army over there. Okay. I don't know, I'm just speculating, it's just my imagination here. But that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philippines, and Philippines. I told you I was going to do that, right? I warned you. I told you I was against the Philistines, and threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. Now, again, think about the way this time era works. That where battles were seen as battles between the gods. Again, and we talked about this when they captured the ark, that when one nation with one god attacked a nation with another god, if the nation that won, it was just kind of assumed that their god was the stronger, which is why with impunity the Philistines could take the ark and go put it in Dagon's temple, because, well, clearly our God is stronger. And so when you're dealing with this this sort of mindset, and you're coming into battle, and all of a sudden you start hearing thunder, that's never a good sign. Okay, so it's like, why would thunder cause them to panic? And it's like, well, that's just not a good sign. Okay, and so but that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines. I didn't do it, and threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. Now keep in mind, the Philistines, they just had 7 months with the ark. Okay, so they know there's something weird going on here in the sense that, okay, we know, so speaking as a Philistine here, I know my God is more important than and stronger than the Hebrew God, but there is that weirdness that took place where our God kept falling down, and people and the rats and the tumors and all of that kind of stuff. So there's a little, they're a little like, okay, we're gonna, and then, okay, oh, hey, this isn't gonna end well, kind of thing. All right. Before the Israelites, the men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines, slaughtering them along the way to a point below Beth Kar. And you can find Beth Kar there on your map somewhere. Not sure where. Somebody find it?
No, it's not on there.
It's not on there?
No.
Okay, well, remember when I said everything mentioned in here? That was wrong. I just say that just to prove that I have been wrong. It's,
Take note.
yeah, good. Just add it to Debbie's list. She's got quite a few there. So the men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines, slaughtering them along the way to a point below Beth Kar. Now later on in our discussion, I'm going to get into talking about this slaughtering thing. Okay, because that's the word that the NIV uses quite a bit to describe these battles, and I'll get into it later. It is a point, and I will get into it later, not today. So then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen. He named it Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." Okay, so he sets up this, and this is one of the things about the Old Testament, that they're very visual. Okay, when they cross over the Jordan River, he says, set up 12 stones. And why am I going to set up the 12 stones? Because your kids are going to say, what are those 12 stones there for? And when they do, then you can say, oh, this is where the Lord delivered. And so there's always this point. These symbols are set up here. And now he sets this stone up, and he calls it Ebenezer, saying, thus far the Lord has helped us. I mean, another way to put it is this is a memorial to God's help. God got us this far. It's because of God that we got to this point. Okay, that it wasn't us, it wasn't our cleverness, it was God's intercession that got us to this point. Okay, and yes, this is where the line from the song comes from. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I've come. Which I believe in the King James, that's how it's translated. But immediately, here I raise my Ebenezer, the next line tells you what it means in the song. Hither by thy help I'm come. Here I raise my Ebenezer. But it is from this passage here. Okay? He named it Ebenezer. Thus far, the Lord has helped us. Double check my list. Samuel is now serving as the leader, judge for Israel. The Philistines hear and assemble to attack. Israel begs Samuel to continue to cry out to the Lord. The Lord makes his presence known by thunder. as a result, the Lord delivers them from the Philistines. Samuel memorialized the event by setting up a stone called Ebenezer. God got us this far. I think that was how we would put it today. And that's where I am. So the Philistines were subdued, and they stopped invading Israel's territory. Okay, now again, this is not a permanent end, because the Philistines come back. Okay, but it's during Samuel's lifetime, essentially. But while Samuel was in charge, the Philistines were not a problem after this point. Okay. I mean, it isn't so much Samuel being in charge as much as Samuel's leadership leading the people to commit to following the Lord. And I think as long as Israel is following the Lord, the Philistines aren't a problem. Okay. But when that goes out the window, the Philistines come waltzing back in. Throughout Samuel's lifetime, and here it is, the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines. The towns from Ekron to Gath that the Philistines had captured from Israel were restored to Israel. And these are two that are the closest to Israel, the nation of Israel, and they're down. Gath is here, and Ekron is just north of that. To Israel, and Israel delivered the neighboring territory from the hands of the Philistines. Boy, I got that on my head. Now that I've got that,
Just has to happen once.
yeah. It's kind of like you're driving along and you see something, you say, don't hit that tree, don't hit that tree, don't hit that tree, crash. Okay, insurance man's never going to believe this story, but kind of, yeah. All right. And there was peace between Israel and the Amorites, which is a collateral benefit, but the Amorites will come back as well, and we'll talk about them. They weren't the big problem that the Philistines were, but as a result of this, they figured, hey, we better settle up with the Israelites as well. Samuel continued as Israel's leader all the days of his life. From year to year, he went on a circuit from Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah, which are 3 cities that surround Ramah, where his home. But he always went back to Ramah, where his home was, and I'm guessing that's where Hannah and Penina, it's his father's name, Penina, were the wife. Elkanah is the husband. But he always went back to Ramah, where his home was, and there he also held court for Israel. Okay, so at this point, during Samuel's lifetime, although he had this circuit that he went on, he stayed in, and I don't know whether this is the model for the circuit riding preacher or something like that, but that's kind of what he does. He's a traveling judge. Kind of comes into town, settles the things, and he built an altar there to the Lord. Now in Deuteronomy 12, 13, and 14, it's just a passage where the Lord says, basically, this is the Stand translation, be careful while you build an altar. Okay, you only build an altar in places that the Lord approves. It's not something you just do. And so the fact that Samuel does it suggests, okay, this becomes, I think, and again, there's speculation on my part, but this becomes the spiritual center. That where Samuel is, that's where the spiritual center is, that's where the altar is. He built an altar there for the Lord. Okay. Any questions? See, that's the peak of Samuel right there. Samuel is peaked. And now we go into chapter 8, which is, okay.
I was thinking back when they drew that water and they poured it.
Mm-hmm.
If there is any significance with when David did that, when he desired that water and his men went and got it for him?
Right. Well, I said we're going to come back to this. We see it again in 2 Samuel 28 or something, where he sends the 3, oh, if I had water from this pool, and 3 of his guys go get it, he brings it, he pours it out, which is really strange. And we'll talk about that then, to say, well, okay, what is David doing here? Okay, but that's in 2 Samuel 28, so I don't want to, that's the other place you'll see this in Samuel. Okay. Are you raising your hand? No.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. All right. So, one of the things I was talking about with Debbie about this was, you know, what would I title today's lesson here? You know, I was going back and forth on what I should title it. So I chose titling it, it seemed like a good idea at the time, which was a line that my dad used quite a bit in discussing his childhood. That, you know, my dad had done a couple of things that in hindsight did not appear to be the brightest thing in the world. And you would say, Dad, why did you do that? Why did you do that? And his response was always, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And that was it. That was the end of the discussion. And I think 1 Samuel 8 may have seemed like a good idea at the time. It certainly did to the Israelites. And this is where Israel demands a king. Okay. Chapter 8, beginning with verse 1. When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as Israel's leaders. Okay. Now, has this happened before in Samuel? How did this work out for Eli? When Eli appointed his sons as leaders, okay? You know, it's other than other than Jonathan, we don't get many good sons in Samuel. I don't know what it is. There's just something about the sons in Samuel, but none of them seem to be any good except for Jonathan. Jonathan is like the exemplar. Jonathan is like the you know, what is not to like about Jonathan? He's like we should all be Jonathans when we grow up. That's kind of the thing. But we'll get to Jonathan later. But here, he appoints his son. The name of the first one born was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah. And they served at Beersheba, which is in the south. It's like the southernmost point of Israel. And in fact, you'll see here references later on in the Old Testament where things are happening from Dan, which is in the north, to Beersheba, which is kind of like when we talk about things happening from New York to Los Angeles, kind of all the way in between. Okay. But his sons did not follow his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. I have a note in my Bible here to say that why can't we get a decent son in this book? I don't know. Okay. Inevitably Samuel grows old and appoints his sons to be judges. Okay. That doesn't work out very well. Okay, because it would be a natural thing, because, you know, this hereditary roles, you know, was like the normal process, that if somebody had a role, then his son would take it over. You know, so that was kind of the normal thing. And so the people of Israel, everything's cool about Samuel. We like Samuel. Samuel's great. Samuel's the guy. You know, but his sons, not so much. Okay? Not so much. And they're like, we don't want to spend a lifetime with these guys. Maybe these guys are remembering Hophni and Phinehas. Okay? If I'm not mistaken, Moses' sons didn't work out too well either. We won't talk about Cain and Abel, you know, just sons. I don't know. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes. So all the elders of Israel gathered together. And what's interesting about this is at this point there's some organization to Israel. Okay, there's some structure. We don't know. There's elders. There are people who are like, okay, you're one of the elders, one of the leaders. Maybe it's each of the tribes' oldest member, the paterfamilias of it. I don't know. But there's a group that have leadership potential. They get together. They look at the future. They go, this guy is getting old. And he's not going to handle another 4 years in office, so we need to get him off the ballot. And I'm sorry, I'm confusing that with
It does sound familiar.
It does sound very familiar. Yeah. They say you're old, your kids aren't going to make it. Okay, and again, you're old, your kids aren't, your son is in court. You know, so it's not going to work. So their solution said. So all the elders gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "You are old." That's a nice way to open, right? We need to have a meeting. Okay, Samuel, you're old. Okay, well, I got you. You're old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now, I'm sure Samuel knew this. Eli knew it about his sons. Okay. They said, you're old and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. Okay, the solution to this problem is we need a king.
Like everybody else.
Yeah, we need a king. Okay, and you know the interesting thing about this is that the Israelites, Israel was supposed to be a different nation. It was set apart. There was supposed to be something qualitatively different about Israel. And what better way to show a qualitative difference is that we don't need this sort of structure, we don't need this sort of organization, we don't need this sort of leadership. We literally just follow the Lord and we're successful. Not so apparent. But when they said, verse 6, but when they said, give us a king to lead us, this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord. So here Samuel is like, okay, this is, you know, maybe he's thinking his sons are going to come around. It's interesting. So he prayed to the Lord. Let's see, in Leviticus 20, let me see, what did I write here? 20 verse 26. Oh, this is just, in verse 26, Moses is talking, he says, you are to be holy to me because I, the Lord, am holy, and I have set you apart from the nations to be my own. And in Numbers 23:9, and that's in the middle of the story about Balaam, 23 verse 9, let me find it. How can I curse those whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce those whom the Lord has not denounced? From the rocky peaks I see them, from the heights I view them. I see a people who live apart and do not consider themselves one of the nations. Okay, so these are kind of indications that the Lord intended Israel to be different, substantively different. So I prayed, and the Lord told him, listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king. Now, what I find interesting about this is if you look at the whole story of the Bible, there seems to be like 3 times in the Bible where the nation of Israel outright rejects God. I mean, there's a scene at Mount Sinai where Moses tells the people that, okay, get ready because God's going to come down. And the people say, no, Moses, no, you go talk to God. We'll just stay here. You go talk to God. The first time. Here's the second time that, you know, the Lord said, okay, we're going to have this nation. I'm going to be the king, so to speak. And the people say, you know, no, we want our own king. And then, of course, there's the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, where is this the king of the Jews? Crucify him, kind of thing. So you have 3 times you've got the nation, or a representative group of the nation rejects. You could take that as a sermon title if you want. So if you want to work that up and see what you can do with it. As ye have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are doing to you. Okay, so I mean, Samuel thought that, oh, things are going to continue, things are going to go great, and the Lord says, now you know how I feel. Basically is what he's saying. Now you know how I feel. They're not, you know, you think they're not abandoning you, they're abandoning me. I've been dealing with it since I created them. Okay, every time we turn around, these guys are running off after their Ashtoreths or the Baals. This is, you know, this is what it's like to deal with these people, kind of thing. You know, I mean, if you remember, he was gonna, the Lord offered to wipe out Israel in Moses' day. And Moses, so maybe it's Moses' fault. Moses said, no, don't kill them all. You know, who knows? Would it have been better with the family based on Moses? I doubt it, but, you know, so he says, now listen to them, but warn them solemnly and let them know what the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights. So make it very, very clear what's going to happen if they have a king. Okay, so the elders, let's see, the word of God, the elders of Israel say to Samuel that you are old, your kids are terrible, so we want a king, such as all the other nations have. The request disappoints Samuel. The Lord tells Samuel that they haven't rejected you, they have rejected me, that is the Lord. The Lord tells Samuel to warn them, and so he does. And I'm just going to read this because it's pretty self-explanatory. Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, This is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his right. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of fifties, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest. That's kind of an interesting phrase there. Some people are going to do really well under a king. You're going to become big commanders, others are going to be farm laborers. You know, I'm sure when he said, some are going to make armies, and everyone's going to go, yeah, my kid's going to be an army captain. And in fact, it's like, you know, you need more people plowing the fields than you need army commanders. But he will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take a tenth of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants. Your male and female servants and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. So this is Samuel talking, okay? This is Samuel, okay? This isn't just some guy in the street. This is Samuel. This is the guy who offered up the thing, set out to intercede, and next thing you know, there's thunder and the Philistines are running. This is the guy who's been judging them for 30, 40 years. He says, this is what's going to happen, okay? And then he says in verse 18, and this is to me, the killer line, closer. When that day comes, and you realize that I'm right. Have you ever had that conversation with your kid? You're explaining something and you go, someday. I don't know when. Usually it's when they have their first or second kid and they realize, hey, mom and dad were right. You're going to realize I'm right. Or maybe have you ever had that moment where you suddenly think, wait, my dad warned me about this. Okay? He says, when that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. Okay. But the people refused to listen to Samuel. I mean, it's like Samuel had been doing great for 40 years, I think it is. And now suddenly they're like, no, we've got this figured out. We understand what's going to happen. We know what we need to do. We got this figured out. But Samuel, no. All of that good rapport we've got with you and all that good record you have, no, not quite good enough. No, they said, we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations with a king to lead us and to go up before us and to fight our battles. Okay. This was not the way the Lord wanted the nation of Israel to run. But this was, he wanted a nation that had removed their foreign gods, that committed to him and served him only. And the people of Israel said, you know what? We want a king to do all of that for us. Okay? And I think John Walton and Bergen also pointed out that what's going on here is they want a political solution to a theological problem. Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Do we still want this? Mm-hmm. Like, a political solution to a theological problem. When Samuel heard all that the people said, he repeated it before the Lord. The Lord answered, listen to them and give them a king. And Samuel said to the Israelites, everyone go back to your own town. Okay, so this is going to take some time. And I think, especially, and we'll get to this when we talk about, the Lord tells Samuel, listen to them, give them a king. To prepare all of this, Samuel tells the people to go home. And I think what happens is, and we'll get to this next week when we talk about Saul, especially with Saul, the Lord gives the people exactly what they want. And we're going to see how that's going to work out. Which kind of makes you wonder sometimes, it's like, we're praying for this thing to happen or that thing to happen, and we're not getting it. We're not getting it. The Lord isn't answering the prayer that I want it to be answered. Well, here's an example where the Lord does. And how does that turn out for the people?
Be careful what you ask for, because
Yeah.
just like that.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the position I'm going to take, that the Lord gives them exactly what they want. Despite warnings, and we'll get more into this when we talk about Saul, because it gets interesting when we talk about Saul, who's an interesting, far more interesting character upon study than just simply the guy before David sort of thing. So, any questions?
So